Thank you, everybody, for joining us today at the Midwestern Hydrogen Summit. I'm delighted to welcome you to Hyzon's Innovation Center for this afternoon, dedicated to discussing both existing activities and exciting future plans for the hydrogen ecosystem right here in the Midwest. I'll start by thanking the groups who helped organize this event: Nicor Gas, the Midwestern Hydrogen Partnership, the University of Illinois, BP, Constellation, and Gti Energy. From catering to AV to invitations, this event would not have been possible without their help. Thanks very much. We're proud to be a part of the growing Midwest US hydrogen community with so many like-minded organizations, all engaging together to drive the hydrogen economy forward today. I'd also like to thank Dr. Jack Brower for joining us today and bringing his perspective and expertise from the West Coast, which happens to be a bit further along in hydrogen development. He brings that perspective to all of us. It was around a year ago that Hyzon moved into this facility with a bold vision to unlock the potential of hydrogen, leveraging our fuel cell know-how. Originally, we occupied just the southern part of this building beyond that big wall, which seemed like plenty of space at the time, given we only had about 15 employees in this location, along with sufficient space to bring the first Illinois-assembled Hyzon hydrogen fuel cell truck to life. Within months, however, we needed to expand to the side we're currently in to accommodate the new employees, production areas, R&D spaces, and warehousing for the growing momentum that hydrogen demands. As you can see, we're still in the process of building up this facility. We naturally started the build-out with Hyzon's core focus, the MEA and fuel cell stack and system assembly, which you'll all get the opportunity to see just behind that big wall over there. You'll have the chance to see what we believe is the first operational US manufacturing facility making fuel cells that are purpose-built for heavy-duty trucking. Hyzon chose to deploy our fuel cells in commercial vehicles because we believe it is the fastest way to stimulate hydrogen demand and to meaningfully contribute to decarbonisation. What better place to do so than the Chicago area, the nation's freight hub, where trucks account for 1 out of every 7 vehicles on Illinois highways, and through which around 50% of the country's intermodal trains pass. These are just a couple of examples of the potential hydrogen demand in this region, complementing existing demand in petroleum and ammonia. As the hydrogen economy develops, we expect that demand to flow over to other industries, including power generation, manufacturing, resource extraction, and construction. Anchored by existing demand and accelerated by projected demand, supplying clean hydrogen will become commercially attractive. Facilitated by many of today's sponsors, the production and distribution of clean hydrogen can grow in lockstep with this demand. Hyzon's growth is an example of the evolving state of the hydrogen industry across the country and this region. The interest, momentum, and very importantly, funding are all growing. The understanding of hydrogen as a clean energy option has become mainstream. I look forward to standing here 1 year from now, looking back on how much farther the industry will have progressed. I expect much of that progress will be driven by people here today. Now I'd like to hand over to Jack, I think. Is Jack next? Ava? It's not on my notes.
Well, thank you so much, sponsors, for inviting me to come here today. It's my pleasure to come here from the beautiful state of California, where we have actually begun to introduce hydrogen ecosystems throughout the state. I'm also especially thankful to you, Craig. Where did Craig go? Oh, there he is. Thankful to you, Craig, for letting me drive that beautiful zero emissions truck. Wow, that was awesome. That was awesome. I'm very pleased about the Midwest progress on hydrogen, because every single jurisdiction that has looked objectively at what we need to do next to achieve zero emissions has found that we need the features of hydrogen to do it. So I want to ask the question today and help you answer it. Can energy conversion be 100% zero emissions? And I want to suggest that certainly, and I'm pushing the button here, but it's not advancing. Here, oh, now it advanced twice. Okay. So I want to suggest that certainly all around the world, people are adopting more sun and wind power, and this is a very good thing. This is the most ubiquitous and equitably available primary energy source on Earth. And it is the cheapest form of primary energy that's available today, cheaper than all other sources. So if we could adopt more and more sun and wind power and control loads to match the periods when they're available, this is the ideal thing to do. And in California, we have greater than 50% about renewable energy on the grid. What's it showing us? It's showing us that it's challenging, actually, to actually match loads with demand when we have a highly renewable electric grid. This is the curtailment that we are achieving in California nowadays, month by month over the last 6 years. And it's increasing exponentially. In addition, we are selling at negative prices to our adjacent states renewable electricity so we can meet our renewable portfolio standards. So, only adopting sun and wind power and trying to match demand to the supply is not very easy. It's actually challenging. And in California, we're finding that this is already slowing the pace of adoption of sun and wind power. So we have to have some alternatives. Oh, by the way, that's also with a lot of solar, a lot of storage on the grid. We have more than 1.5 gigawatts of battery energy storage, plus 9 gigawatts of pumped hydro on our California grid. Still can't manage 50% renewables completely. Okay, so this is important. So we need other things. In addition to battery energy storage, pumped hydro, and sun and wind power. And electric fuels are going to be super important for the management of the grid and for use in these other applications like Hyzon's beautiful trucks. And hydrogen is one of those electric fuels. You can make it from the renewable electricity. It also can be combined with CO2 to make other liquid fuels and derivatives. It can make Fischer-Tropsch fuels, things like methanol, methane. It can also be reacted with nitrogen to make ammonia. Okay, so all these things are going to become important increasingly together with storage to meet our renewable demand in the future. And I don't like the color pinwheel of hydrogen. It's not very useful. There's different emissions rates in every one of those categories. Okay, but I do like the color green. Why is that? Because that's historically had a meaning. A meaning that is sustainable, renewable, desirable, low emissions. That green feature, I do encourage in hydrogen. And there are many ways we can make green hydrogen. I'm showing many of them here. By far and away, the most important one, though, is this e-fuel production. This production from renewable sun and wind power. Why do I say that? Because all around the world, I'm just showing the United States here, it's the most ubiquitous primary energy source available. It's available all around the world and equitably, as you can see here. Distributed throughout the United States, distributed wind throughout the United States, but also around the world, this is the case. So, can we make a 100% renewable electric grid? That's the first question. This is our simulation of 100% renewable California electric grid. The deficits are shown as red data at each hour throughout the entire year, and the surpluses are shown as blue data. And we can install enough sun and wind power to actually meet all the demands. The integral under the curve of the surpluses is greater than the integral under the curve of the deficits. So we just have to move this around, store it, deliver it at a different hour. So how do we do that today? We do it with pumped hydro. Remember I said we have a big pumped hydro system in California, but look at it's only about 9 gigawatts and can only provide 9 gigawatts for about 25 days. That's a massive battery, massive storage system, but it's insufficient for a 100% renewable grid. What if we made all our cars zero emissions and we only used them to store energy for the grid? This is how big they would be. Did you even see it appear? It is a tiny amount of energy in comparison to what the grid needs. The only vector with zero emissions that can come close to meeting this demand is something like hydrogen. If we just converted existing gas storage facilities to hydrogen in California, this is how big it would be. It's the only resource that is of the proper scale to enable a 100% renewable electric grid. It's the only thing that can store things on a seasonal basis for long durations. The separate power and energy scaling features and these huge underground storage facilities that we already use today in the gas sector are the only things large enough to make this possible. Besides, all around the world we have coincident demand of electricity and heat or electricity and gas. This is a study we did in the Northwest US, and you can see here, we have a 70 gigawatt hour peak in gas and a 30 gigawatt hour peak in electricity, and if we put them together, we have a combined 95 gigawatt hour peak, similar to the summertime in the state of California. The gas peaks at the same time that electric peaks. So if we want to electrify everything and not use e-fuels or hydrogen, we have to double or triple the electric infrastructure to meet that demand, just the peak demand. And if we electrify transportation, we have to double it again. This is one of the reasons we need hydrogen in addition to batteries to make this work. Besides, resilience is also engendered by underground delivery of the gas. We can see here from a GTI study how much more reliable the gas system is and how much fewer outages occur in the gas system compared to the electric system. And there's proven fuel cell operation through natural disasters and all kinds of things that has occurred all around the world. And certain transportation applications are going to require the lightweight features of hydrogen. That is, anything that requires rapid fueling, long range, or heavy payload is going to prefer at some distance, at some payload, the features of hydrogen compared to batteries. In addition, even in the light-duty sector, I think we'll see a lot of hydrogen adoption because of infrastructure challenges. In the early years, let's say you want to convert 20% of your fleet to zero emissions. Then battery charging infrastructure might be the cheapest. But if we want to go to a 100% zero emissions fleet, the infrastructure costs for charging are going to be not possible, way more expensive than the infrastructure for introducing hydrogen plus batteries. Okay, so even in the light duty sector, we should expect hydrogen to be adopted because of infrastructure challenges. And then there are certain sectors that you just are impossible to make zero emissions without the features of hydrogen, like cement, steel, pharmaceuticals, plastics, ammonia production, and computer chip manufacturing. These sorts of things require the feedstock or heat or reducing gas characteristics of hydrogen. So I'm very fortunate to work with a bunch of colleagues through a wonderful DOE project that has Fuel Cell Energy, Hatch, LEAP, Politecnico di Milano, and SoCalGas as partners, and with my colleague, Dr. Luca Mastrapasqua, who will become a colleague of yours soon. As a matter of fact, he just accepted a faculty position at Wisconsin-Madison. Sweet. So he should be joining this Midwest initiative in hydrogen. But we're working on green steel, and we have wonderful advisors from this group of steel companies, Nucor, ArcelorMittal, Midrex, and Tenova. And we're advancing this idea of solid oxide electrolysis integrated with direct reduced iron processes. And we have the novel features of the high temperature electrolysis that can take heat from the DRI furnace, thermally integrated, and can do co-electrolysis, both electrolysis of CO2 to CO and water to hydrogen. And we're showing that we can actually build cells that work properly under these circumstances. And we're showing that we're saving about 20% of the energy demand, and we're saving about 90% of the CO2 emissions associated with steel making with this concept. We're also showing that you can actually decarbonize ships with the lightweight features of hydrogen. No battery energy technology can decarbonize ships the way that hydrogen can. And you can see here that we can get at over 80% of the original cargo in all of the ships that we've analyzed. And we can go over 1,700 nautical miles in a hydrogen-powered container ship and carry at least 90% of the original payload. And we can make that hydrogen from renewable energy. As a matter of fact, 3 wind farms offshore in California are sufficient to make all the hydrogen to decarbonize completely the ports of LA and Long Beach. Hydrogen's the only known zero emissions vector that can do something like that. And we're analyzing the ships themselves. The ships themselves are technically, feasibly made zero emissions using hydrogen. And we're looking at various ways to store the hydrogen as ammonia, or as methanol, or as liquid hydrogen, or as gaseous hydrogen. And almost all of those have the potential, at least, to make shipping zero emissions. We've also looked at the fact that even nuclear power will need the features of hydrogen in a zero emissions world. We have, again, we're fortunate to work with a wonderful team. I'm showing them here. I can't list them all because of timing, but again, also Luca's working with me on this project. But the key idea is that we can engender flexibility in nuclear power plants if we introduce the hydrogen vector, so that when we have an abundance of solar and wind power and we must turn down the nuclear plant otherwise, we can use it rather to make hydrogen or to make hydrogen derivatives like Fischer-Tropsch fuels and the like. And this is what we're studying in this newly funded project. Okay. Since in so many jurisdictions around the world, hydrogen is receiving the appropriate attention it deserves as the thing we must invest in next to achieve zero emissions, we see many opponents and naysayers coming out of the closet, right? And some of this is actually funded by people who oppose hydrogen for various reasons. Maybe they're political reasons, maybe they're their own business interest reasons. Some of these are just disingenuous because they hate something that is associated with hydrogen, like the fossil industry, let's say. So I want to spend the last part of this talk, how much time do I have left? 6 minutes, okay. I spend the rest of this talk talking about the various things that are argued against hydrogen and to give you some ammunition to fight them with it, okay? The first is water use for electrolysis. Yes, there is a lot of water that is required for electrolysis, but all the studies that we have looked at suggest that the hydrogen economy should use less water than our current fossil economy. As a matter of fact, you can see in the charts on the right, logarithmic plot, by the way. Okay, you can see the fossil fuel energy industries on the left. It uses more water than the hydrogen economy on the right, and orders of magnitude less water than agriculture in the middle. Okay, and a couple of anecdotes from our own analyses. All of Southern California cars could be made zero emissions with less than 1% of California aqueduct flow. This is the major flow of water from the north to the south, okay? Or any home could be powered with 1 additional toilet flush per day. 1.6 gallons, that's all you need, okay? So that's not a big challenge, the magnitude of water that's needed. I was fortunate also to work with a good colleague, Julio Friedman from Columbia University, former Deputy Energy Secretary, on a study about hydrogen. He also has a really nice commentary out on hydrogen leaks recently. But anyways, making the hydrogen footprint of green hydrogen should be functionally negligible when it comes to the magnitude of water that we will need. But that doesn't mean we don't have challenges with water, and it's in particular because of the places where water is today. So for example, in the oceans, that's difficult to use, okay? And the distributed desert environments of renewables, okay? These are going to be difficult to actually acquire some water in some of these circumstances. Besides the fact that many people, including some researchers in our group at UC Irvine, were studying the direct seawater electrolysis. And I think that's going to be a major contributor too. All right, so water's not that big of an issue. How about leakage? You all know that hydrogen leaks faster than all other gases. It's so small, it has to leak faster, right? This is what I thought 3 years ago. And then we started testing our own natural gas infrastructure with hydrogen mixtures with natural gas, pure hydrogen, pure natural gas, and we found that they're all leaking at the same rate. And I kept asking my graduate student, are you sure you're measuring it correctly? But no, natural gas, 10% hydrogen, natural gas, pure hydrogen, they were all leaking at the same rate. And we found a copper epoxy solution to make all of those leaks negligible. So we can fix leaks also for hydrogen, for natural gas, and for combinations of such. So we started looking at the original publication that everyone refers to say hydrogen should leak at least 1.3 times faster, or 2.8 if it's laminar flow, or 3.15 if it's diffusive flow. Okay, this is what everyone says. And as a matter of fact, the science is proven. If you have laminar flow, if you have turbulent flow, if you have diffusive flow, hydrogen will go faster. But even in the seminal paper that studied this, Swain and Swain, in 1992 in International Journal of Hydrogen Energy, they found this. Under some circumstances, leak number 1, leak number 7, leak number 2, hydrogen, methane, and propane all leaked at the same rate. And they dismissed this with one sentence. They said, we don't know why they leak at the same rate under these circumstances, but it might be entrance effects or compressibility. That's all the paper says. Well, we propose a theory in this paper where we say hydrogen leaks at the same rate in low-pressure gas infrastructure. And it's a mechanism that is a non-continuum flow mechanism. A non-continuum flow mechanism because when you have typical leaks through these threaded fittings, you have interactions with the wall that occur rapidly and continually in a way that is non-continuum flow. So leaks, yes, we do need to be concerned about them, but is it going to leak faster than methane? Not necessarily. All right. It was wonderful to work with one of your colleagues, Professor Petrosophanis, okay, from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, on this investigation of embrittlement, fatigue crack growth rate enhancement that occurs in pipeline steels, especially transmission pipeline steels. And we found that even if you have a 53% through crack to start with, and you put pure hydrogen into this transmission line and study the dynamics of pressure, it takes over 80 years for that crack to fail. So I want to suggest that embrittlement is a very serious issue. It should be studied and investigated for all circumstances. But it's not necessarily a showstopper. It could possibly be managed by simply accelerating the rate at which you actually replace this pipeline. People are talking about climate impacts of hydrogen and suggesting that it is an indirect climate pollutant because it reacts with the OH radical, as you can see in this reaction that I'm showing on the screen, and thereby allows methane to exist in the atmosphere longer. And this is a true and, I think, good set of atmospheric chemistry, but the study itself has very bad assumptions with regard to the amount of displacement of methane that would correspond to the use of hydrogen. As a result, I suggest that we should go back to previous studies that show, yes, that hydrogen can have an indirect impact, but if you substitute hydrogen for methane, you end up having a 99.4% reduction in greenhouse and global warming potential. Hydrogen as a substitute for methane is a very good thing. If you let methane leak and hydrogen leak, it's a bad thing. But it's mainly a bad thing because the methane's there. Okay, finally, people are saying nitrogen oxides are going to go up if we put it in the gas system. We've been studying all kinds of appliances, and for the most part, These emissions go down when we introduce some amount of hydrogen into the gas system. And we know the science for cases in which it goes up. We can modify the burners to actually make nitrogen oxides go down. So overall, we know we can reduce nitrogen oxide emissions if we introduce it into the gas system. And we've shown that if you do have 20% hydrogen in California's natural gas system, that we actually have air quality improvements associated with hydrogen mixed with natural gas and going to existing appliances. So, can we have a 100% zero emissions energy conversion? Absolutely. But you need the features of hydrogen. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. As you can tell, Jack's one of the best spokesmen I've ever heard for championing hydrogen and making a story for hydrogen. So I'd like to invite my fellow panelists up to the stage. As they come up, let me introduce myself. My name's Ted Kraus. I'm the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Program Manager over at Argonne National Laboratory. I'm also one of the founding members of the Midwest Hydrogen Partnership. Our goal is to promote hydrogen in the Midwest, so if you're interested in it, want to learn more, please contact me after the speaking portion of our program. Before we begin, you should all have index cards. So if you would like a question asked of the panelists, please write it down, raise your hand, and somebody will come down around and collect it and pass it on to me. So let's begin by meeting our panelists. Our first panelist to our left is Colleen Wright from Constellation. Colleen, tell us something briefly about yourself and Constellation's role in hydrogen.
Thanks, Ted. It's nice to be here today. Colleen Wright, Vice President of Corporate Strategy at Constellation. Constellation is the largest provider of clean power in the United States. We have 90% of our power is clean today, and we have a commitment to have 100% of our power be clean by 2040. So we also have a large, that's mostly from nuclear power, and we also have a large commercial and industrial and residential business as well. So we served 3/4 of the Fortune 100.
Thanks, Colleen.
Yep.
To Colleen's left is Richard Clark from BP. Richard, tell us something briefly about yourself and BP's interests in hydrogen.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Richard Clark. I'm an originator in BP's gas and low carbon energy business, focusing on hydrogen. We do a pretty good job in BP of creating complicated job titles. So in my own words, that means I lead the business development from the commercial side of our hydrogen aspiration in the US market. So BP is invested in becoming a low carbon energy company. We have a net zero ambition for 2050 and an all of the above solution, which includes wind, solar, biofuel products, carbon storage, and of course hydrogen. I think there's a huge buzz in hydrogen, and I think that's why we're all here today. And I think we're getting closer and closer to a tipping point where we'll see hydrogen and all of the conditions necessary to get to large-scale deployment of hydrogen, as we've just heard from Jack, in the not too distant future. So I'm pretty excited about this conversation. And so thank you for inviting me on the panel, and thanks to Hyzon for hosting
Richard.
this event.
To Richard's left is Dave Montgomery from Caterpillar. Dave, tell us briefly something about yourself and Caterpillar's interest in hydrogen.
Sure. Well, thanks, first of all, for everybody coming today. It's great to see, the chair's full and people even standing in the background. It just goes to speak to how important hydrogen is going to be to all of us, and Jack did a great job of talking about the way that hydrogen provides a lot of the features that we need for decarbonization. There's a lot of vectors though, right? And he talked about Fischer-Tropsch fuels, he talked about methanol. All of those are other interesting decarbonization vectors that we need to pay attention to, but many of them facilitated by hydrogen. So Caterpillar's really dedicated to helping our customers find the right solution. If your shipping vessel fuels up once a month, then hydrogen is probably not the best choice, but it enables good choices with other fuels that will be the right choice for those kinds of long distance applications.
Thanks, David. And last but not least is Christine Wiley from Gti Energy Hydrogen Technology Center. Christine, tell us briefly about yourself and GTI's interest in the hydrogen.
Great, thank you. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Hyzon, for hosting. And I have to say, I've been on panels with Jack before, and every time I hear him speak, it gets better and better. So I really appreciate your enthusiasm there. At Gti Energy, we are focused on energy transition solutions. So we are an R&D organization. We advance, we develop technologies, taking a lot of the work that researchers such as Jack do, and then collaborate with industry partners like the companies that are represented here to really scale and deploy those technologies. We do have a focus on hydrogen, really spanning the full value chain. So really advancing how we produce it in a low carbon, low cost manner. How do we transport it? Looking at how we leverage our existing gas infrastructure, and then how do we use it optimally in different use cases and end use applications. So excited to further the discussion here around hydrogen.
Okay, thanks, Christine. As I said, if you have questions, please write them down, raise your hand, they'll be brought up to me. Let me start it off with the question, you know, if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, there's a lot of hype. You hear a lot about hydrogen there. You know, the US is finally catching up. What's the hype of hydrogen? Why now? Christine, would you like to lead us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to lead us off. I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of hype, but I think it's for a good reason, and Jack did a great job of teeing that up. But not only is the technology coming along where electrolysis costs are reducing and manufacturing is increasing. Right now, 98% of all hydrogen produced in the country, and I think in the US, is gray hydrogen production or produced by natural gas or coal gasification. So there's a lot of room to move in the space. But not only that, as Jack talked about, the renewables on the grid increasing as well is a great opportunity for increased deployment. So that's, you know, one of the big opportunities here as well. And then the biggest piece is that right now the cost of gray hydrogen production is much lower than green or other colored hydrogen production, so low carbon hydrogen production. But we're seeing policymakers step in to help us reduce that cost and create parity where we can see adoption for consumers across different classes of applications. So for us, it really feels real. There's been cycles of hype, but I think this is real. So.
Anybody else on the panel like to comment?
Sure. At Caterpillar, we're seeing unprecedented interest in green fuels of all sorts, and it's really driven a lot of interest from top down at Caterpillar, as well as the interest that we always have in research of, you know, kind of the bottom up, find the new technology, something we think is going to be impactful in the future. So really with that meeting in the middle of interest in helping our customers meet their carbon reduction goals, we see this as something that's going to last a long time and really provide those kinds of capabilities that our customers really are asking for in unprecedented numbers.
So I would agree with my co-panelists here. Maybe I would just add that the motivation is different now, right? We have a lot of commitments to achieve net zero emissions, whether they're coming from regions or states or corporate commitments, and we know that we need a portfolio of solutions. We are going to continue utilizing strategies to decarbonize, like energy efficiency, integration of renewables, but we need low carbon solutions like hydrogen. So I think that motivation is different. I think you're also seeing, as Colleen mentioned, the commitment at the federal level. So you have the opportunities around the regional hydrogen hubs. You have billions of dollars that are being allocated towards developing hydrogen technologies across the full value chain. And then you also see the investment from industry organizations that are represented up here to really advance those technologies.
Yeah, maybe I'll just all of that completely agree with, and then for us, the hydrogen economy exists today. I think 100 million tons of hydrogen was produced in 2020. The IEA are calling for 2x growth by 2030, and then increasing exponentially beyond that. So it's here today, and the growth potential is really exciting, and clearly lots of convergence of policy and commitments to make that happen.
Okay. as you all know, I mean, ground zero for a hydrogen economy in the U.S. has been California. As Christine pointed out, the government is making large investments into the development of the regional hydrogen hubs. Let's look at it from the Midwest perspective. We have a lot of clean energy in the Midwest. How do you view the opportunity for hydrogen in the Midwest?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick it off again too.
Well, you don't have to be
Unless somebody else
first.
wants to jump in. So I think the last estimate I saw was that there was like about 2.3 million metric tons of demand within the Midwest region, kind of Illinois centric. And if we think about how much nuclear power Constellation has, for instance, we have 176 terawatt hours. So if I round that up to 200, that's about 4 million metric tons. So if you compare a kind of 4 million metric tons of clean power converted to hydrogen to the 2 million metric tons in the region today, the nuclear power that we currently have in the state is a huge advantage for converting and growing a hydrogen economy in this region and converting the existing demand to be clean hydrogen. And that's not kind of considering also the advantages of the renewable assets that we have in the state and otherwise. And we also have a significant amount of industry and consumption in the state, particularly being an industrial hub with a lot of transportation coming through the state and through the Midwest. But I'll let the other panelists add on to that.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add a few things that I completely agree with everything you said, Colleen. And I think the opportunity in the Midwest is huge, and the potential is huge as well. Colleen's rightly pointed out the nuclear capacity in the region. But the wind, solar, renewable resource in the region is a great foundation for, maybe I shouldn't use the colors, sorry Jack, but green hydrogen. And also the carbon storage resource in the region. The geology is, we expect to be very good for carbon storage, which creates the opportunity for blue hydrogen. So you can look at an all of the above solution, which I think is exactly what you need to help develop the economy in the right way, develop the hydrogen economy and the hydrogen opportunities in the right way.
Yeah, well said, and I agree, and I like Jack's comment that the color wheel for hydrogen is something that probably isn't the best description of the way that we need to move forward with these technologies, because it really needs to be some of everything. And we need to look at all these options. You mentioned a couple good ones here, the blue hydrogen capability with the geology that we have in the Midwest, the possibility for low carbon intensity hydrogen from nuclear. Those are all great. It's also a transportation crossroads that's been hit here, and so that should not be underestimated, that the ability to impact a lot of freight movement through the Midwest by carbon reducing the vehicles used in that application as well.
So I'll try to bring it all together here. I think we talked about a lot of the different components and ingredients that are needed to really create a hub, right? To create something that is sustainable, to create a larger hydrogen market where, we've talked about the different feedstocks. I think within the Midwest, we benefit from having that diversity of feedstocks, maybe versus some of the other regions. We've talked about the infrastructure, right? I think in terms of infrastructure, you can look at the pipeline infrastructure that we have within the Midwest to move gas, whether it's natural gas or it's hydrogen. We can look at the geologic formations we've already talked about in the Midwest. There is tremendous opportunity and capacity to be able to store CO2 and saline formations here. Also looking at being able to store hydrogen in the subsurface. And then the demand. In the Midwest, there are a large number of industrial facilities that range from steel to, power generation, whether that's coal or natural gas, and opportunities there to be able to reduce emissions. So when you combine that all together, I think that makes for a really nice hub. And that's a lot of the hard infrastructure. I think also in terms of the soft infrastructure, when you think about the resources in terms of people and expertise and innovation and research, you have a lot of that here within the Midwest, obviously represented on this panel here, and bringing that together because we need a lot of that innovation because hydrogen is new in the way that we want to use it.
Yeah, and the industry that's here, right? We have Caterpillar here, of course, but there's also the steel making, there's refining, all of these applications where hydrogen can really play a pivotal role in decarbonization.
Okay, this question I'll ask Richard to start it off because this company is the biggest user of hydrogen in the Midwest. So the two major uses of hydrogen in the United States right now are petroleum refining and ammonia production. But what do you see as the next big emerging market sector for hydrogen?
Yeah, great question, Ted. And I think it makes a lot of sense to look to the existing platforms for hydrogen to start with. See what opportunities you have there, and no doubt refining and other chemicals are a big opportunity to look at deploying and decarbonizing hydrogen. They use hydrogen today, so using clean hydrogen just makes a lot of sense. But also growth in those sectors. You look at things like renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel. These are low carbon products for mobility, which are going to be important components to decarbonization. They all need hydrogen, and better to be clean hydrogen to produce those products. So I kind of include the potential for growth in those existing platforms. And then, from my perspective, one of the most exciting opportunities for growth is in the mobility space. I look where we are today, and you got to think that this is going to be an exciting place to be. Not just in 10 years' time, but next year. This is going to be a lot of excitement in mobility. I think the hydrogen demand into mobility, it starts off relatively small, but it's absolutely essential to have mobility sector in place for the future. There's going to be a huge demand for clean hydrogen in this sector.
Yeah. Time shifting the electricity, we heard a lot about that from Jack, and he absolutely is right on that we need to have an efficient way to do that. And using our lithium-ion batteries for that limits the ability to use those in transportation. And so being able to use hydrogen to time shift our electricity is really an important step for us to take.
Christine?
Yeah, so I agree with that. I think if you look at some of the recent studies that have been done on kind of the applications and market opportunities around hydrogen, common theme that you see is the focus around the industrial sector and the mobility sector. I think you see that, potential opportunity here in the Midwest as well. But one of the things that we need to do with hydrogen is to, be intentional and start getting projects off the ground. And you can do that with other applications, that have already gotten some attention. So I'm going to give a shout out to my colleagues here in our mobility group who are leading our H2 at Scale project in Texas. But there we're actually demonstrating a renewable hydrogen network. But some of the applications there are for backup power. You see companies like Microsoft who are investing in using fuel cells for providing backup power. So I think there's some of those other more niche applications where we can get some experience and practice now with hydrogen as we start to look at the broader opportunities around industry and transportation.
Yeah, I'll wrap us up. I agree with everything the panel said. I really like the comment about the sustainable aviation fuels and the e-fuels. I think that's particularly exciting because you can think about a future where we combine direct air capture with hydrogen production and create e-fuels, and that's just, to me, the technology is just really amazing and where we're going and the potential of it. So I think it's a really interesting market.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so each of your companies plays a role in the economy. Richard's BP right now is the biggest user of hydrogen. Constellation's talking about getting into production of hydrogen. David with Caterpillar, they make technologies that will utilize hydrogen. Christine, GTI is a technology enabler in the hydrogen economy. So, as I said, you all represent different parts of the overall hydrogen chain. What are you hearing from your customers about hydrogen? David, let's start with you.
Number one thing we're hearing from them is they're having trouble getting enough hydrogen to be able to participate in our product development. We have products that through some DOE funding that we've landed and other avenues, we have some products that we're ready to start putting out in the field, and it's a little tough for some of those people to get enough hydrogen to do the 1,000-hour a year kind of product cycles that we need to finish our product development.
So maybe I'll go next. In terms of our customers, so we do a lot of work with utilities and pipeline operators. I would say from their perspective, a lot of the questions, they're very interested, right? Everyone wants to explore how they can utilize hydrogen within their system. But there's a lot of questions that they have, thanks to Jack and some of his research. Some of those are getting answered. But then as we start putting it in practice, there's a lot of tools that need to be adapted and recalibrated within the gas infrastructure system, for example. So as they continue to do leak surveys, as they focus on pipeline integrity, right? Because they have to comply with PHMSA regulations. All of those engineering tools need to be adapted because now they're moving a different gas composition through their infrastructure. And so that's part of what we're doing, is kind of looking at it from the operational perspective to help them adapt those tools.
We're at our core in the business of selling clean power, clean energy, and sustainability products and solutions to help our customers become cleaner. So when we're having conversations with customers, they're trying to figure out how do they reach their sustainability goals and how is hydrogen part of that story. So not only is it that they want our clean power, but now they want clean hydrogen as well. So we're in this unique position of being able to provide both of those products in the future and being able to do that at scale. Nuclear power plants are, a single unit is around 1,000 megawatts, a dual unit is around 2,000 megawatts. That's a lot of power that's existing today that can be used to scale and help support customers reach their sustainability goals. So that's what we're hearing from customers today. And what you heard from Jack earlier as well, this idea that there's going to be wasted clean megawatts on the grid. Nobody wants to see wasted clean megawatts. We don't want to curtail our clean power. We want to use our clean power to create new sustainable products for customers that will help us reach our decarbonization goals and grow the economy. So that's really what we're hearing from customers.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting what you said about supply being an issue, and I've heard that before.
There's always the chicken and the egg, right? And we're trying to do the best job we can of getting the products to use the hydrogen, and it's one of the most exciting things about the hydrogen hubs coming is that that's when the hydrogen will come, and we can't wait until then to develop the products.
Yeah, completely agree. And I almost think we spend a lot of our time thinking about hydrogen supply, and I always think, geez, that's not the problem. Actually, I think we can supply hydrogen. It's more about coordinating the delivery of supply with the consumption side. So that's kind of what I try and convey in those conversations. And then I think there's a general theme that I've heard in conversations, which is everyone is very hydrogen curious. Mm-hmm. And you get into a lot of conversations, and it's clear that people are interested in decarbonizing, and they want hydrogen to be a solution, and it is a solution. But they also need to learn what that means for their company and how to do it. And there's definitely something around partnering and working with potential customers of hydrogen to understand what their issues are and actually go ahead and solve those issues.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I guess we all know we're feeling kind of the high price of energy in the pocketbook right now. If you're familiar with hydrogen, what they call gray hydrogen, the way we produce it today by steam reforming, is the cheapest form for producing hydrogen. DOE is putting over $1 billion investment into R&D to reduce the price of hydrogen to make it cost competitive. But when you have any new sort of paradigm shift in the market, there's a lot of challenges it faces. So cost aside, what would you see are some of the major challenges being faced for hydrogen, maybe in the Midwest or nationally? And Christine, let's start off with you.
Yeah, I guess if you take cost aside, because I do believe that we'll have the technology breakthroughs that are needed. You already see that being endorsed and really fostered through DOE. But I think we need to get to scale, right? So we need more projects, investment, and commitment. But a part of that means that we need to de-risk these technologies. And so maybe building off of the comments from Richard, that takes a lot of partnership, public and private partnership, collaboration across different stakeholders, whether it's, R&D organizations, universities, ENGOs, industry, but really to work together to get those projects off the ground. And then I'm not focused on regulations, but I do think that we need a regulatory framework that it enables that, as well as some sort of incentives, whether we're talking about production tax credits or other mechanisms to be able to incentivize that market adoption.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit back to the chicken and the egg, that people are a little concerned about safety because they haven't seen hydrogen installations other than kind of NASA and refining capability and things like that, and not so sure how safe it is. I think that will come with time as well, as this becomes normal, just like we all see liquefied natural gas fueling stations now and don't think anything of it. But when those first appeared, people had questions about the safety there too. So I think that's just another one of the places where things are going to bootstrap up in the near future.
I agree on the policy and the regulatory side, absolutely. And some of this stuff, the rules just aren't written yet, so we need to make sure that all happens. I've got a really positive spin on this, because every conversation that I'm in, it's not what are the barriers, it's what do you need? What do you need to make this a success? And that kind of attitude and engagement from all levels just gives me a lot of optimism that, yeah, the challenges are there, but actually we'll be able to work through this. And I know there's going to be challenges here, but I'm not too concerned about it. I'm pretty optimistic we'll be able to figure all this out.
Yeah, to add to Rich's optimism, I think what's been really exciting is just a sense of collaboration among all of the different parties and participants in the value chain. So everybody from the national labs and the research institutes and the suppliers of the technology to consumers and producers. There's just a sense that everybody needs to be part of this conversation. Everybody needs to participate and engage together. And that's really where this hub concept came in to begin with, this idea that you need to bring the supply and the consumption closer together to minimize the infrastructure needs. But it's really encouraging to see how everybody in the Midwest and frankly nationally has come together around hydrogen, because it is such an exciting opportunity, but it's not a go-it-alone opportunity. It's an opportunity that requires collaboration and engagement across sectors. So.
Okay, so I mean, as you've learned or you've heard, the federal government is putting a little over $9 billion into hydrogen under the bipartisan infrastructure law. They've put hundreds of millions into R&D to help develop the technologies. But, what do the state and local governments have to do? What role do they play in helping to spur the hydrogen economy? I mean, you can see, the role California has played in helping to launch the hydrogen economy in California. When you look at it from, say, the Midwest perspective, what roles should local and state governments play? Colleen?
Yeah, I think the state governments are doing the right thing. The formation of the task force in Illinois, for instance, has been a great opportunity to bring people together and try to create this economy and create the economy in the state. I think other things are, what's on our mind is really this idea of either a production or a consumption tax credit that will support the adoption from a customer side, help to reduce the cost of hydrogen, and increase the ability to scale the federal dollars within the state and the region.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. You go back to the policy and the regulatory side and helping us develop the rules that are not written yet in certain situations. And then on the policy side, you've got to kind of look for ways, I think, to incentivize the decarbonization. And I think there's great examples across the US of that. As an example, things like low carbon fuel standards, cap and trade programs that are popping up in different states, all take us one step closer to being able to make this a reality.
Yeah, commitments as the infrastructure comes to states to build that infrastructure in a way that has the lowest carbon impact, identifying clearly the authorities having jurisdiction that need to be worked with to get the infrastructure in place. To your point, a lot of the rules around hydrogen safety could use some clarity as well, and having a single focal point for state and local governments that are those authorities having jurisdiction that are really focused on how do we build this out and how do we do it safely.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just add a couple more points. I think in terms of getting projects off the ground, obviously there's going to be permitting issues, so we'll have to work directly with state agencies and local agencies to get that through, especially when we're talking about the urgency around being able to adopt hydrogen. I also think there is the role of just education and awareness and outreach to work with those agencies and communities, because that's a big part of it, right? A big part of why we're looking at hydrogen is to be able to, bring clean energy to all communities of different sizes and maturities. Part of that education and awareness, I know we've been very fortunate to work with state officials like Senator Ellman here and bring awareness to her on what we're doing within hydrogen. And I think those conversations and that dialogue needs to continue.
Okay, so we got a couple questions from the audience. I think most of you realize, Texas is considered the energy center of the United States. You have most of the petroleum refining down there, the chemical industries down there for various reasons. But you're looking at, even in Houston today, if you would go to the internet and you do Houston Hydrogen Hub, that whole region has a vision for, instead of being, say, petroleum-based as the energy center of the United States, hydrogen-based. So the question is, can the Midwest produce enough clean hydrogen to replace Houston as the nation's energy center?
No one want to answer that?
Well, Richard, you're with BP. BP's part of it.
Well, I live in Naperville, and I got to say, hell yeah. I think you come back to look at the advantages this region has, and it's a different set of characteristics that you need to have a low carbon energy industry versus, say, the more traditional. And I think you look at what the Midwest has. We talked about transportation corridors. That's going to be massive. We talked about carbon storage. That's a massive enabler. Wind, solar, nuclear resource. It's all there for the taking. So we just have to pull it together.
Yeah, I would add, Illinois is one of the cleanest states in the country. So we have, I think it's about 500 some pounds per megawatt hour of emissions in the state, and Wyoming is the most emissions intensive, so there are 2,000, so we're quarter of the emissions. So I think we have an opportunity to be better than Texas because we're starting from a much cleaner profile, and what we're trying to do here is be the cleanest state. So I'd say let's be cleaner than California, and that should be the objective, not try to knock out Texas in energy production. Not interested in that. So.
David, do you have a thought on this?
Well, any of those projects would require a lot of CAT equipment, so whether they do it in Texas or Illinois, we're going to be happy to sell them some as close to greenhouse neutral as possible CAT equipment to build those projects.
Christine?
I would say, I think for Texas and the Gulf Coast, some of the benefits, but then also some of the challenges that they have is that they already have hydrogen production there. They already have hydrogen infrastructure, but then they also have so many big players right? So you have a lot of all-stars in terms of energy companies there, such as BP, but you all need to work together to create a hub within that region. And so I think that also creates a lot of challenges in being able to bring those parties together. I would say, you know, one thing that I do admire about maybe just Houston, the city of Houston, you know, they are very ambitious in their clean energy goals. They have their clean action plan, and you actually see it from the leadership. So if you've ever heard Mayor Turner speak, you know, he's very passionate about being able to create, you know, Houston as not just the energy capital, but like the clean energy capital of the world. So I think, you know, having that type of leadership is important as well.
Okay. The next question basically is along the same line. If we were to get there, what are we lacking in the Midwest? If we were to become sort of, let's say, a major energy player in the Midwest, not only a consumer, but a producer. I mean, if you look at Texas, it is a major producer of energy.
Well, I think Christine and others kind of hit on it. When you compare what we have in the Midwest to what they have in Texas, we're just missing a lot of the infrastructure that they have existing, because Texas already produces and supplies a lot of hydrogen, so they have a significant amount of infrastructure in place. I think we're, you know, missing some of that core infrastructure, but it's not something that's unsurmountable or something that we can't work around.
Yeah, I think it's getting that critical mass together of stakeholders to jumpstart these projects.
And that's what the DOE grant funding will help us do.
Okay. Let's do a question on safety. I mean, early on when I got involved in hydrogen fuel cells for light-duty cars over 25 years ago, you know, when you mentioned hydrogen, everybody saw the Hindenburg. So from a safety perspective, you know, let's say, you know, you look at the other energy vectors we have here. For example, natural gas, it's a gas, hydrogen's a gas. From a safety perspective, you know, do you see any concerns? I mean, when you look at hydrogen today, you know, it's primarily used where it's produced. You know, it's what I would call, a lot of its use is behind the fence. But, you know, in California now, you know, you can refuel your own car. So now you're starting to bring it into the general public. You know, how do you see safety? Is it an issue? You know, what's your view on, you know, safety?
Well, you know, safety is our highest priority. So it's absolutely essential. And we have a lot of people thinking about how to implement hydrogen safely in the future, but also a lot of people looking at that today. Ted, you called out that BP uses a lot of hydrogen today, so that's you know, that's very much on our minds a lot of the time. I'm actually quite optimistic about it. I think there's a lot of issues to resolve around hydrogen safety when you expand it, but also there's a lot of similarities in how we treat other risks and other issues in existing industry that are all managed today, and I've got no reason to expect that we will not find good solutions to how to manage all of those issues in the future. And I think it's more of it's just something new. There's maybe a little bit of there's some questions around this is new. How do we need to handle this differently? And maybe not enough emphasis on what we do today and how we manage risk today around existing products.
Yeah, I mean, we should be leveraging the experience that we already have today, like in refineries, for example. In California, obviously, fuel cell vehicles are being used. There's the most hydrogen fueling stations there. I mean, we should be leveraging that talent and that resource to educate, right? And then you also have other organizations like the Center for Hydrogen Safety who are doing that, trying to do that outreach and education, and are going to be key as we deploy these various hydrogen projects.
Yeah, the Department of Energy has a role there too with the Hydrogen Safety Council. They've done a great job on the projects we've collaborated with them on. But yeah, safety absolutely has to be priority one, not just because we want everybody home safely every night, but we can't have a safety incident that gives us a setback in the hydrogen industry. So for both of those reasons, it's really critical.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything everybody said, so I don't have anything substantial to add.
Okay, thanks, Colleen. One last question, unless we have any from the audience that follows up. So, I mean, there's a lot of interest in hydrogen. The government's making investment. I mean, $9 billion for at least 4, maybe 6, maybe 10 regional hydrogen hubs sounds like a lot of money, but you know, if you're in industry, you realize $1 billion doesn't go that far these days. And you know, a lot of times from the public's perspective, you know, they'll hear about these technologies of the future. Let's say, for instance, nuclear fusion, and the first thing they hear, it's 30 years off. And the next thing they hear in 30 years, it's still 30 years off. So the question is, you know, there's a lot of interest in hydrogen, not only in the United States, but really abroad. When do you really, you know, the government's investment, what they're hoping for is, this is the seed to grow the economy. So when would you see a hydrogen, what you could say a hydrogen economy, really starting to take hold, really starting to materialize? Are we talking 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
I kind of think it depends on the incentives as well. So if we saw federal incentives come into play, I think we'd see much more rapid adoption and increase in infrastructure development. With the hydrogen hub funding itself, it's going to really support some initial infrastructure investment, but to see the economy transform completely, I think we're going to be looking out, you know, 5-10 years certainly, just to see the dramatic transformation that we're anticipating.
Yeah, and I think if you were to just put it in context of the hubs funding,
Yeah.
right, you have $8 billion that are allocated towards hydrogen hubs. And if you look at their timeline, DOE's timeline, we're talking about a span of 8 to 12 years
Yeah.
for these infrastructure projects. Obviously, we're going to need much more investment if we're going to want to see hydrogen integrated across our full energy value chain. So yes, within decades, but with increased attention and investment.
And there's also a lot of existing infrastructure and equipment that the new versions of that will be available using hydrogen or e-fuels. But in the case of something, back to the ship example, that has such a long life, you have to start replacing those now, and frankly that's why the e-fuels are so interesting to customers now, is that they want to protect the vessels that they're going to have in 2050 because they need to meet the IMO standards in 2050. Those vessels that they're buying now are likely to still be in use then. So it depends also a lot on that rollover rate and retrofit capability of these technologies.
I think the IEA are calling for a doubling of hydrogen production compared with today by 2030. So that's their view. My own personal view is that that's not going to be linear. So there's going to be a lot of hard yards in moving this forwards, and then the growth rate will really start to step up. So we'll see when that inflection point hits, and when it does, my gosh, it's going to get really exciting.
Yeah. Just the sheer, the ability to scale up manufacturing itself of electrolysis is going to take time, and we're seeing backlogs already in the supply of the equipment, so.
Got one last question here, and it has to deal with, let's say, education of the public. You know, one of the issues, is faced is basically NIMBY, not in my backyard. You know, there's talk about CO2 pipelines and everybody's up in arms about that. You know, what do we need to do to educate the public? You know, we're all in the technology area. We understand the benefits. We understand the technology. But you're really deploying it to the public. What do we need to do to educate, to bring them up to speed, to accept hydrogen as a, energy source for their lives?
So I do think you have to come at it from multiple facets, right? Like working with regulators, working with commissioners, working with state officials, working with universities, looking at workforce development organizations, to be able to educate different stakeholders and the general public. I'll use an example from some previous work that I did around residential methane detectors. Most people don't even know what a residential methane detector is, but we were deploying that technology for additional safety, an additional layer of safety for customers in case there is a natural gas leak in your home or in, commercial businesses. And it took a lot of discussions and conversations and meetings with different stakeholder groups and directly with the consumer to educate them. And I think we're just starting that here in the hydrogen discussion.
Yeah, and as the hydrogen is available, the equipment to use hydrogen is available, then I think there will also be a acceleration due to people's interest in doing the right thing, right? We've seen that with electric cars. People are, there's no requirement to buy an electric car, but electric cars are selling, they sell out as soon as Ford introduces the new pickup truck, right? Before they ever get them on the lots. So I think there's a lot of interest from the public in doing everything they can, and I think we just need to let them know that hydrogen is part of that.
Yeah, there's something about it being normalized. If you think about what you do day to day, currently, I mean, you take your car to a gas station, you put gasoline in it, and you ever stop to think about the hazards associated with the product you just put in your car? All that's managed, and it's just normal to you. It's what you do. Hydrogen will be something different with different considerations, but over time, it'll be normalized, I think, in the same way. As acceptance grows, the just level of comfort will increase.
Yeah, I think one of the really exciting things about hydrogen is the opportunity to improve the emissions in environmental justice communities where you see, ports, rail yards, areas where heavy-duty transport is coming in and out have a tendency to be more of the environmental justice communities where we can reduce emissions and improve quality of life pretty significantly. So there's a significant opportunity there to talk to the public about the value of the emissions reductions using hydrogen. It is interesting, it's just different, I think, than the education around electrification too, because the market is so dramatically different, and what we're finding even is it's not just even the education of the public and people in the communities, but it's also the education of Fortune 100 companies that don't know what hydrogen means for their sustainability goals. So there's this whole spectrum of education that has to happen around hydrogen. There's just a lot of work to do there.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left. I'll give the panelists an opportunity. If any of you'd like to make, just one final comment, I'll open it up. If not, let's thank our panelists, and this wraps up the session.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Colleen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Lindsay. I'm a senior advisor to the University of Illinois, Granger College of Engineering. And for the past 3 years, I think it is now, Ted, at the University of Illinois, and in particular my colleague Petros Safranis, have been working with Argonne National Lab, our friend Ted here, who just left the stage, and many of you to establish a Midwestern hydrogen partnership. And most recently, we've been trying to assimilate the resources needed to go after one of these hubs. And there's no question we have the tools and the talent in Illinois and the Midwest to bring one of these hubs here. And it's my privilege to introduce someone who's been particularly helpful in these efforts. Senator Laura Ellman was the primary sponsor for the state of Illinois first hydrogen legislation the Hydrogen Economy Act that just became law last month. This act had unanimous bipartisan support in both the Senate and the House, which isn't surprising because it's in the sweet spot for producing benefits for the economy, for the environment, and for our communities. The Hydrogen Economy Act establishes a task force that will be responsible for developing a plan to make Illinois a leader in a regional hydrogen hub. So please join me in welcoming the senator from the 21st District of the great state of Illinois, the Honorable Laura Ellman.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. It's so great to see some familiar faces, but I have to say it's even better to see new faces. I'm thrilled that the interest in hydrogen is growing and that our hydrogen economy will take off. You know, I'm a first-time legislator. I've worked in industry, manufacturing and engineering for about 25 years, and I've taken part in larger ecosystems of commerce. You know, customers and suppliers, of course, but also companies and people that facilitate that commerce. There's IT, there's finance, there's educators. We talked about safety, research, and more. And I'm excited about the new jobs, the new skills, the new products, and the new knowledge we'll discover and invent as we generate, deliver, and use hydrogen at scale. What I'm most excited about is that this is going to grow and thrive right here in the Midwest. Obvious, it seems so obvious, you know, especially after that esteemed panel. But here in the Midwest, this is where we grow things. This is where we make things. This is where we move things. And we have a lot of energy. We actually in Illinois have surplus energy. We generate a lot of power. The Midwest is a great place for a variety of things. We talked about a lot of uses. We didn't really talk too much about the agricultural uses that, that hydrogen can afford. It's a great place for agricultural generation with wind and solar and uses of hydrogen. We talked a little bit about ammonia. But even locally generated hydrogen could potentially fuel tractors, combines, and those local trucks so that agriculture could be a completely green industry. My experience in industry has been, like I said, in manufacturing, and the Midwest has been a vibrant hub of manufacturing and can continue to draw investment as particularly as we reassess the risks of globalization. The Midwest has the energy, the workforce, the educated workforce, the infrastructure, and the quality of life that companies, businesses, and employers look to grow or to expand or to relocate. Hydrogen can be used in chemical, semiconductor, and steel production. And based on my experience in industry, as the availability of hydrogen increases and prices decrease, we might even find new ways, new substitutions for hydrogen in those in industry, generally. Now, we are in, obviously, the Midwest, but we're here, right here in Will County. The Midwest is the crossroads of America and the continent. Will County is the home of the largest inland port in the United States. And I don't know the number, the percentage, but a big percentage of freight passes right through where we are. We've got rail, highway, waterway, arteries that allow the heart of America's commerce to beat right here. The transportation sector is probably the most immediate and largest immediate demand for hydrogen. And it's great that we're here at Hyzon. So we certainly recognize how well suited the Midwest, and in particular, Illinois is in growing the hydrogen economy. Now, just a couple updates. The governor's office has reached out to neighboring states. So we are looking to get a regional hub. And the governor's office has reached out to neighboring states with a draft of a memorandum of understanding so that other states can join forces and collaborate to secure that DOE funding. They're fine-tuning this that enables multi-state clean hydrogen hub, capitalizing on each of these states' strengths in industrial, agricultural, and transport sectors to establish that robust supply chain of supply, generation, delivery, storage, and ultimately demand. So a little bit about the task force. I'm really excited about getting this rolling. The task force, it's got four objectives. To establish a plan to create, support, develop, or partner with that hydrogen hub and determine how to maximize federal investment, federal financial incentives to support that hub. Identify opportunities to integrate hydrogen in transportation, energy, agriculture, and other sectors. And so we are actually, the task force is legislators, industry, research, educators, and agencies. We've got a variety of different agencies: EPA, IDOT, DNR, who else? Agriculture are all going to be part of it, and also the fire marshal to talk a little bit about safety, to really have a good, well-rounded discussion on how to increase hydrogen right here in Illinois. Also, later this month, actually I'm leaving on Saturday, I'm going to Wichita to meet with other Midwestern legislators so that, we're here to meet each other, become more aware of what's going on. I hope to be doing that next week with my fellow legislators in Wichita because it's a Midwest conference, and I'll be hosting a breakfast on hydrogen. So hopefully making some cross-state partnerships so that we can move things forward. Just in closing, I am bullish on hydrogen. It just seems so natural for the Midwest to generate the hydrogen with our excess energy, to deliver and store it with the infrastructure that we have and that we can build, and also to use it because we do have such a wide variety, particularly in Illinois. We've got such a diverse economy, we can have many, many uses and demands for hydrogen. I'm really excited. I'm thrilled to be here, and I look forward to meeting some more of you in the next few minutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, State Senator Ellman, Dr. Brower, Dr. Ted Krause, and all the panelists for sharing your insights with us today. This concludes the formal programming, and now we can move on to having a little more fun. If you're interested in taking a tour of the MEA and fuel cell area in the next section of the building, by all means assemble in the general area of the fuel cell system on the assembly mounts over there. And if you're interested in going for a ride in a fuel cell truck, then the truck's just outside the door that most people made their entry via. So just to reflect on some of the content here today, that's pretty exciting stuff. Hyzon, as many of you know, is all in on hydrogen. Our entire thesis for our business model is based on the core fuel cell technology, which we've developed over many years, and we're very proud to showcase that today. We heard some great examples and some great specific references to the extent to which hydrogen will deliver energy independence and energy resilience. And this is a world that drastically needs more energy independence, and the future world, being far more dependent on hydrogen than fossil fuels, will be a safer, more equitable world. Hydrogen is the ultimate egalitarian fuel. You can literally make it almost anywhere from anything. And we'll be delighted to decarbonise all the trucks that grow our fresh food in the Midwest we'll be delighted to help our friends at Caterpillar decouple from diesel for their future product platforms to enable all these projects to occur and our lives to go on. We're very much looking forward to playing our role in helping the world decouple from fossil fuels. Thank you all very much.